Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Get Out of Wrap. Coming back on for the second time today is our industry friend, Stephen Yap, the research director at the CCMA. And we're going to be talking, or Stephen's going to be talking about Odigo commissioned some research, and with the CCMA, it's come out. It's the voice of the contact center consumer research. It looks to be fascinating. I was saying to Stephen just beforehand, I purposefully have withheld reading it prior to recording this so we can find out all about it straight from the horse's mouth. So Stephen, thank you very much for coming back on.
Thanks for having me, Martin. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. We were just talking about the recent awards and how good it is to see the industry again, but you touched on something that the industry where everyone's working hard, and I'm wondering just whether that kind of stuff came out from the research. But let's go back. So Odigo and the CCMA wanted to do this key bit of research. What were the sort of parameters you were given? What was the mission?
So this is actually the fourth time that we've done this bit of work with Odigo. So we've been doing it now for a few different ways, which is brilliant because it allows us to see how things are changing over time. So each time we do it, we keep some of the questions and we track how things are evolving using those consistent questions, and then we include some new content each time we do it. So we've got a few waves under our belt now, and this is hopefully going to continue to be an ongoing series that we do at the CCMA with Odigo. And we call it the voice of the contact center consumer. So it's an annual survey. It's a quant survey. So we talk to 2,000 people up and down the UK. It's a representative survey. That means that we set up the sample so that we've got the right proportions of people in different age groups, men and women in different regions of the country. So the sample looks a lot like the UK. So when we report it, we can feel very comfortable that it's a good cross-section. And it's a good sample, it's a good representation of the UK adult population. So that's how we do it. And then what we do is, it's actually two parts. So the first part is we execute that survey, we design the questions, we implement the survey, and then we take some of the results and we bring them into conversations with people in the industry. So we conducted a number of discussions with leaders of different contact centers, different industries, to get their reactions to the results. And then we put that all together in the report, which we launched in May, just last month. And it's always really well received, and it's become a little bit of a, if you like, a currency, I think. I'd like to think it's become something that gives the industry some understanding of where the consumer mindset is and how things are changing when it comes to topics that matter to us, like channel behaviors, like overall perceptions around the state of customer contact and customer service. Those are the things that we keep each wave. Some of the stuff that was new for this year included what the average sort of person on the street, the public thinks about careers in customer service. That's a new piece for this year. And it's always good to see how things are changing, particularly during times like this when things are changing a lot. And obviously we've been through the last couple of years, huge amount of change, but the pace of change isn't slowing down, that's for sure.
Wow. I think something you said there just really struck me around this is currency. In as much as we're all here, our whole industry is here to provide services and products to consumers, and understanding where they are at, where we're all at, because we're all consumers, right? Understanding where consumers are at across the country and how what we are trying to do is being received. There's probably nothing more important than that.
Yeah, and I think so. I mean, I'm a researcher and I get paid to do this, so maybe I'm not completely unbiased. But we talked about a little bit about this last year when I was on the show. I came into my role at the CCMA with a bit of a mission and with an ambition, if you like, to help provide some good insight, some good content that is hopefully genuinely useful and genuinely relevant. And I said at the time, and I don't mind repeating, I think the challenge we've got is we don't actually have that much really good, genuine and relevant insight in the industry. And people ask me this question a lot. What do consumers want? And in a way, that is actually the simplest question to answer. I don't need to commission a survey of 2,000 people to tell you what consumers want. When it comes to customer contact, people want their questions and their queries resolved quickly and painlessly. That's it. There's nothing more to it than that. There is absolutely nothing more to it than that. Of course, actually delivering that is not easy, and delivering that is getting harder, and expectations are changing. Things like channels are changing, but when it comes down to it, that will never change. It's ultimately about solving someone's problems, solving your customers' problems quickly and painlessly. Now, if you accept that that never changes, there is space underneath that to understand and to actually research the things that are changing. And if you like, things like the channel preference, channel behaviors, a topic which we've explored now for a couple of waves with Odigo, is the perceptions around the state of customer service. Well, not the only organization that does this, of course. There's other benchmarks, but we wanted to make sure that we had our own benchmark to see, if you like, are we moving in the right direction when it comes to overall perceptions around customer service? Because there's so much talk about, wait times. There's so much talk about, every week there's something in the newspapers. It's not just a contact center industry conversation. It's a wider social conversation. Is customer service going in the right direction? So we wanted to make sure that we had our own currency, if you like, in that area. So on the one hand, I think it's incredibly simple and we don't need research to answer the question. But on the other hand, there are ways in which research can help, I think, which is to tell us, are we going in the right direction? What are some of the ways in which we could go in the right direction? How do we make sure that we are delivering what the customer expects, if you like, in terms of things like channels? In this year, we have something new in terms of times of the day when people would prefer to make contact with organizations. And with recruitment, of course, being such a hot topic, it's always a hot topic, but never hotter than in the last year or so, given the difficulty of recruitment and the job market that we've got right now. What does the general public think about working in customer service? That's another topic that has always interested me, because it's always struck me that customer service has a reputation, and if you like, has a popular reputation, which doesn't always reflect the realities of what it's like. It tends to, people tend to think of it as a very low skilled occupation and perhaps something that you do before you get a proper job. Whereas we all know that working in contact centers can be extremely rewarding, and it can be actually set you up for many different types of careers. It's an incredibly rich learning ground. It trains you so well. So I wanted to understand this year in this survey, what does the general public think about careers in customer service, and what are some of the more positive perceptions, and what are some of the areas that perhaps we as an industry need to be aware of when positioning careers to, and advertising for recruitment. What are some of the things that we need to work on in terms of shifting those perceptions?
That sounds absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to get into that. When you at the outset you said 2,000 people, and you select them so that they reflect the makeup of the UK, right, both in gender, location and demographics. Yeah. So with certainty you can say this research gives us statistical confidence to say it's reflective of the UK. That's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just basic good survey design. Make sure you've got a decent representative sample. And as most consumer research is done today in the UK, it was done online. So almost all of the research, not political polling, that's still done door to door, but almost all consumer research now is done through online panels. In other words, these are pre-recruited people who signed up to take part in surveys, and they get incentivized like frequent flyer points. And 20 years ago, when these were new, people were asking, well, is that a good way to do surveys? And cut very long story short, that's how most surveys are done these days.
And that's so when you look at the results, and like you say, this is the ones that you've put in there for the previous 4 or 4 now, what are some of the key changes that you've seen in terms of the trends?
So let's start with the first topic, if you like, the biggest topic, which is the state of customer service. There is no bigger, broader topic than that. And obviously, this being a podcast, I'll try not to go too much into the actual numbers, but I'll just try to tell the story, if you like. And of course, all the detail, all the numbers, all the data is available. It's a free download, ccma.org.uk. There's a report which I wrote, which has all the details in there. If you look at the state of customer service, it's a very simple question. Compared to 12 months ago, do you think customer service is about the same as it was 12 months ago? Do you think customer service today is getting worse, or do you think it's getting better? What do you think, Martin?
Do you know what? When you were saying that, I was thinking, right, if Stephen asked me what's my answer, I would say it's got better based on my personal experience.
Yeah, tell me more. Why?
I can remember the previous year, we just moved into this house, and so you're contacting utilities, energy providers, local authorities, and I've had to do some of that again this year. And I've noticed a difference. And one of the things being, it stands out now when companies are still using the pandemic as a, I'm really sorry, bear with us. You're kind of like, come on, really now still.
It's unbelievable, really, that people still have that on their recorded messages.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, get with the program. And I would say overall, generally, I think it's shifted in a more positive direction. Don't get me wrong. There's been a couple of occasions where I've been frustrated. Yeah. However, I would personally, I'd say I think it's got slightly better.
Right. So what we saw in the survey, and I've had this conversation now a few times when I've presented this results, and I always do this. I've just done it with you, Martin, and I always do it in the room, if you like, whether it's an actual room or a virtual room. And what I always find when you've got a group of people, and what we found when we had a group of 2,000 people, and what you would find if you literally ask everybody in the country, is that actually you get 3 groups of people of about equal size. They're about equal size. So the world can be divided into 3 groups of people, all of which are about the same size in terms of the size of the groups. So you'll have approximately a third of people who think, oh, it's about the same as it was. You'll have a third of people who think it's got better, of which you are one, Martin. And then you have a third of people who say it's got worse. So it's not a consistent answer. So what you need to do then is, it's okay, well that's really, that doesn't tell me very much. You then actually need to look at a little bit, another level down. And when you start looking at age groups, this is, it's quite telling. It's a very blunt instrument, by the way, to be able to cut data by age group, because not every person at the same age is the same. Not every 21-year-old is the same as every other 21-year-old, and not every 60-year-old is the same as any other 60-year-old. But it's a way to see things that you wouldn't see when you're looking at a population at the at the overall level. And what you do see if you were to just cut the population of the UK into people aged 18 to 34, which I will absolutely accept. That's a really big group, right? People aged 18 are really different to those aged 34. But if you just do it that way, you have your second group, which is 35 to 54, and then you have your third group, which is 55 plus. You can cut it much finer than that, by the way, but just for simplicity, we'll cut it into 3. So we'll say sort of mature, middle, younger, let's call it that.
Yeah.
You see a massive difference just in those sort of really blunt groups. You see a massive difference between the mature group and the younger group. Massive difference in how people see the state of customer service. So if you look at if you look at that question, if you look at the proportions of people who say customer service is getting better, in the 55 plus group, only 19% only 19% say that customer service is getting better. More
Really?
than twice the number of people within the 18 to 34 group would say the same. So in the mature group, age 55 plus, 19% of people say it's getting better. Within your younger group, 18 to 34s, it's 40%.
Wow.
So it's more than twice. But you flip that around, if you look at the proportion of people who say it's getting worse, in the younger group, it's 20%. And in the more mature group, it's 43%. So they're almost mirror images. They're almost mirror images of each other. So in the mature group, more than twice the number of people think it's getting worse than it's getting better. In the younger group, more than twice the proportion of people who say customer service is getting better than say customer service is getting worse. And if you were to go fine, if you look at 65 plus, if you look at 18 to 24, you'd see that even more exaggerated. There's a huge difference. Now, we're making generalizations here. As I said, not every 60-year-old is the same as other 60-year-old, but I think there are some important things to take out of this finding. So, and I say this as someone who's much closer, by the way, to 55 than I am to 35, much closer.
Same.
Now, I think when we presented this to contact center leaders and we asked for their take, some of the things that we heard were, this is consistent with what I've seen. We see typically our younger customers are quicker to pick up self-serve. They're quicker to pick up our digital channels. And our more mature customers will tend to want to speak to somebody, will tend to sit on the phones. And of course, as wait times on the phone have inevitably gone up and stayed up since the pandemic, that's one reason why. Because if you are somebody who tends to gravitate towards the phone as your primary customer contact channel, then you're more likely to have experienced poorer service, because there is a lot of evidence that wait times have gone up in the last year and last 2 years and have stayed high, and they're not going down anytime soon because demand has just gone through the roof. And I don't think anybody can dispute that it is, generally speaking, a fact that more mature people tend to be later adopters of new technologies. That is a real thing. That when it comes to digital technologies, when it comes to using emerging channels, that your younger customers will tend to be quicker to adopt those channels, generally speaking, than your more mature customers, because they tend to be more comfortable with new technologies. They tend to, they've grown up with their smartphones. They're very comfortable doing that, and your customers age 55 plus take a little longer to pick up those technologies. So those are all true. So you could say, well, okay, well, that's just the way it is, isn't it? And it's, this is just showing that more mature folk just haven't taken up these new channels yet, and they'll follow, won't they? Over time that will change. I think if you stop there, you're not seeing the whole picture. I think if you stop there and just concluding that this is just a generational gap, that's actually a little bit of a complacent way of looking at things. If you think about what's happened in our industry, if you think about what's happened with customer contact and the proliferation of channels, and there's been huge proliferation of channels. It's been one good thing to come out of the pandemic is we worked really hard and fast, didn't we?
Yeah.
We worked fast.
Yeah.
We did it because we had to. We did it because all of a sudden we couldn't service all the demand through our existing channels. So we had to very quickly roll out new channels to cope. And in some cases attempt to deflect. And that happened really, really quickly. And overall, that's a good thing, because that drove a lot of innovation. It drove a lot of agility, but it happened quickly. We didn't take the time necessarily to build those experiences in a fully inclusive way. So again, huge generalizations. Your average 21-year-old is probably going to be reasonably comfortable with if you like, an imperfect digital experience, right? Because they're accustomed to that, right? Somebody who is, say, 65 years old, if they are faced with a digital experience they don't understand or which is clunky, they're much more likely to reject that and go back to the phones. And the reality is, a lot of the experiences that we've quickly rolled out in the last 2 to 3 years are imperfect. They're not necessarily honed. They haven't been developed, if you like, with the needs, inclusively with needs of more mature people in mind. Let's face it, most developers are not age 65.
No.
Most developers are in their 20s and 30s and are tech savvy themselves, and naturally will develop for other 20-something, 30-something tech savvy people. That's just the reality of it. And I think for me, there's a bigger piece about digital inclusion. I think that in the huge push, which is a good thing, to be more digital, we are at risk of leaving people behind. So it's a new type of digital divide, and the old digital divide still exists and will always, to a certain extent exist. It's in terms of availability, in terms of people who can afford to have fast broadband or live in places that have fast broadband versus people who can't afford it or happen to live in places where fast broadband is not available. All this talk about working from home, for example, has actually exposed the fact that there are millions of people in the UK who don't have access to the core infrastructure needed to work from home. So they don't actually have that option available to them. So that's kind of the first type of digital divide. The other type of digital divide I think we're seeing, and this research helps to, if you like, to expose, is the fact that for a lot of old, particularly more mature people, they're not getting those experiences. They're not getting the right experiences through all these new channels. I think that the much more widespread dissatisfaction with the way that customer service is heading is a reflection of the fact that we've worked really quickly to develop these new experiences, and in the meantime, the old experiences, the phone channels are getting worse, aren't they? So it really depends on your point of view and your context. If you're 65, you're probably much more likely to be reliant on voice. You might have tried self-service. There's evidence in the research that actually people of all ages are really willing to. It's not like older folks are not willing to try, but they've probably found the experience poor and they've gone back to the phones. Whereas if you're a so-called digital native, if you've grown up with digital experiences, you'll probably just stick with the digital experience and you'll only pick up the phone if all other channels have been exhausted. So it's really, really different. It's different. My kids would give you a different answer to me. I'm sure your kids would give you a different answer, that you would. And you and I, Martin, are probably, because we work in this industry, probably a little bit more, shall we say, a little bit more educated, a little bit more digitally savvy than most. And even I think even we would have a different context to our kids. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is I think in with all the good work that we've done to bring out these new capabilities to deflect demand, we need to be really careful we're not leaving people behind. There's more than 16 million people age 55 plus in the UK. That's an awful lot of people. That's an awful lot of people. We also know that society tends to focus on the young, tends to favor the young, tends to develop for the young, and everybody's talk. Everybody used to be millennials. Now it's the so-called Generation Z. Everybody focuses on the young. Let's not forget about the 16 million people plus, who are 55 plus. The majority of whom, or should I say, within that cohort, within that 16 million, people are much more likely to say that things are getting worse than they're getting better. And if you look at the results year on year, if you look at our survey results from 2022 versus 2021, the proportion of people who's age 55 plus who say things are getting worse is growing.
Is it?
So that's another way to cut the data. Look at the proportion of people year on year who say it's getting worse. Last year, it was 34%. Last year, the proportion of those aged 55 plus who say it's getting worse it's about 1 in 3 said it's getting worse. This year, it's gone up to 43. It's gone up from 34% to 43%. The proportion of people aged 55 plus who say their customer service is getting worse. So I think this is a bit of a wake-up call. I think it's a strong message that we need to think about being more inclusive. We need to continue to invest in our digital experiences, but we need, now that we if you like, we're back to, I don't know if we are, actually back to any kind of normal. I don't even know what normal is, Martin, but
Yeah.
now that, if we have now the time to go back and revisit those experiences and hone those experiences, we need to make sure that they're inclusive, because we're leaving a lot of people behind.
There's so much there that I love. Some great terminology as well, just digital native. I was like, I absolutely love that. And I think the last word you said pretty much there before I butted in was inclusion. And this we have to take as a message to say that tranche of the population that's 55 plus, we have to include in this journey when we're progressing all the time. As you say, we're looking at different channels, we're looking at different ways of digitalizing the existing channels, and what can we do and innovate. And when you were talking in a very small way, I've developed a football community here. So I came to a new town, wanted to play football, through word of mouth, started with 5, and now we've got 38 members in the group. We meet every Sunday, and it's basically first come, first served, up to a certain number, and then we take payment and stuff like that. And I thought, I'm not going to manage doing this just through a WhatsApp group and cash. So I found an app, and it's an app specifically for grassroots sport. And great news, everybody, download this app, upload your card, you mark your availability on it, I put the fixtures on it, and people pay through it. Now, the vast majority, no problem. The people that have had problems fit your research in that, and we've got a wide spectrum of ages, like a bell curve. The guys that have registered 3 or 4 times, been contacting me non-stop, can't pay, want to know why there's no phone number to phone the people that developed the app, say that the chatbot doesn't work when they've offered help. It is all in that group. And actually, having spoken to them when I come to see them for the football, it's massively impacted the wider experience of even just being part of the team. They hate the app with a passion. They've got used to it now, because I've sort of walked them through it face to face, in the pub. But up until that point, they were like, oh, I thought about not even bother playing football. And I was like, that's a bit extreme, isn't it? Just because of the app. But then when you think about it, it must be really, really frustrating if you can't get it. And I think something you were talking about, that digital native, the younger, everyone else that didn't have problems, probably if they had a glitch, they're used to, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete it, reinstall the app. I'm going to update the app. I'm going to do this. They know some fixes themselves, and they know, right, chatbot or whatever, it's fine, no problem. And they're far more comfortable. It's just part of the process, So it's fascinating stuff. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but
it was a brilliant illustration of exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? Where if you expect people to use the app, if you expect people to use the technologies and they struggle to do so, that you exclude them, because they have to, don't they? They have to use the app. And there is an analogy with customer contact, where in some cases, and I think most organizations have pulled back from this, but certainly I heard plenty of stories that people were, because they had to, because it was so difficult to maintain the level of assisted resource, that people were actively deflecting away from voice channels and away from assisted channels to apps and to self-service channels. And the good news is, I think people are now reopening and making capacity available again for the assisted channels, recognizing that the deflection wasn't great for customers, but the impact, particularly on more mature customers, is really, really significant. Now, I think for me, there is we can acknowledge, and we can fully accept that more, generally speaking, more mature customers will be later adopters. We can also while accepting that, acknowledge that we need to work harder in making the likes of our app and the likes of other digital experiences easier for our customers to use, rather than just developing something quickly and throwing it out there and then hoping that people will use it, which then ends up tending to be majority to the younger customers because they're used to those sort of half-baked types of things. Is bringing in our customers into that development process. So, good UX practice. Make sure that you've developed your user experience with those customers in mind. Make sure that you've done user testing actually with those target customers, and make sure that you're collecting input and feedback and implementing that input and feedback from those customers. And I can think of a couple of examples of organizations that have done that, and actually their apps are really, really well received and highly used amongst people aged 55 plus and even older. So there's evidence from our research that there is willingness. So it's not like people don't want to use it. It's they've tried it and they find it hard. And the alternative, which is voice, is not as good as it used to be. But there's also evidence that if you build it properly, they come, and you can overcome that challenge. I think it's incumbent on all of us to keep that in mind, and to build our experiences inclusively, and recognize that we have to make the effort to do that, because most experiences today don't naturally come out of the box fully inclusive. There's a second point from the research, Martin, that I wanted to draw upon, sort of going back to your question, what have we seen that's changed? So one of the questions we've had since the very beginning of the Voice of the Contact Center research is, Voice of the Contact Center consumer research is, for each of these types of queries, would you be willing to serve yourself, or would you be happy to, would you like to be assisted, or would you be happy to self-serve? Okay. So we've got a number of different types of queries here, ranging all the way from checking a status of a delivery, to lodging a complaint or inquiring about a refund. If you imagine a bar chart, in the report, you got a bar chart with all these different, each bar represents like different types of queries, and that bar chart is split in two. So you've got certain queries where you've got a much higher level of willingness to self-serve, and you've got other queries where there's a much higher desire to be assisted. So let me sort of throw the question back to you, Martin. In what circumstances? In what circumstances would you want to talk to somebody? What types of queries would you want to talk to somebody?
Great question. I think a topical one, if it was about a holiday query, and you saw on the news that the airports were full and flights were being cancelled, I wonder if going on a website and seeing a message that says, "Don't worry, everything's fine. Just go there an hour before you would do normally," would suffice to calm me and the family down. If I went, I've been on the website and they say it's fine, I imagine I'd get a request to, can you double check? Yeah. So something like that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's this is something that I'm hearing a lot of now, is this when there's a lot at stake, when it's your holiday at stake, right? When the risk of getting it wrong is literally you don't get to go on holiday, and there's a lot of emotion involved, then that's when you want the reassurance of somebody telling you it's all good, it's confirmed, you're fine. And actually, as we are in this crisis that we are now, in this cost of living crisis, that need for reassurance is going up massively. That need to know, okay, your money's going through, or the transaction is fine, or yes, you've changed the parameters on your ISA. That need to talk to somebody just to get that reassurance is really going up, even though for many of these transactions you can self-serve. What I'm hearing is that even when people have self-served that transaction, they still pick up the phone. Did it go through? Because they need that reassurance of somebody telling them that yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we've been asking this question now for for a number of ways. I said we've been doing this at CCMA with Odigo now for some time, so we can see how things are changing over time. And the first couple of waves for all of the different types of transactions, the willingness to self-serve across all transaction types was going up. It was going up. So at that time, we were saying it's becoming normalized. And that was a function of what happened during those pandemic years when self-serve did become normalized, because it was much harder to get assistance. Wait times went up, and they're still high. Because many providers rolled out new self-serve capabilities. Even organizations you couldn't self-serve before, you can now self-serve thanks to all the innovation and the investment that's happened in the last couple of years. And it's also because certain things I think have really helped to normalize. So for me, delivery is kind of the classic use case. 5 years ago, you might have had one or two delivery companies that would give you an update, and even then it was, you'd be doing well to get a delivery on the right day, let alone what's normal now, which is the hour slot, isn't it? I've got something coming. I've got something coming, at about 12:30 today, and I'm very comfortable now doing this podcast with you because I know that we'll finish before 12:30. But back in the days, you used to worry because you'd like, well, do I need to stay at home the whole day to wait for my delivery? Things have got better, haven't they? Delivery updates have got so good that we just take it for granted now. We take it for granted. We're quite happy. Why would you? There's not much at stake. There's not much emotion involved. Why would you wait on the phone to get a delivery update if you have the option to get it online or on an app? You wouldn't, would you?
And in some cases, you can see a graphic of where the truck is, by the street.
Yes. So yes. And thanks to Uber, by the way. Uber pioneered that model of showing you where the vehicle is. We all got used to that through Uber, and that made its way into the delivery domain. So the delivery use case has become for me like the epitome, if you like, the archetype of self-serve. The other one, which I think is the archetype of app. So what we're seeing is that for most queries, app usage is still quite nascent. But the one use case where app is becoming really normal is your bank account balance.
Yeah, very true.
Now you can still get your bank account balance through IVR, and if you want to, you could wait for a human advisor to tell you your bank account balance. But for most of us, we now get it through an app. And for me, that is, if you like, that's like the use case that's going to start to normalize app-based customer contact, because we now have apps and we're quite comfortable using bank apps for bank account balances. We'll be using our apps for other things. And now I've got a couple of online banks. And I can't remember the last time I phoned a bank, because I do it all now through the app. And I think you'll start to see a lot more of that now. Of course, when it comes to other things, such as when you want to complain, or such as when you're querying a bill, that's when you see there's a lot lower willingness to self-serve. And those are the sorts of queries when people want to talk to somebody, because there's more at stake. And particularly right now, because of this economic situation that we're all in, actually, there's more at stake even than ever before. If getting your money back on a refund, you actually need that money more than you ever needed before. If you're defaulting on a bill, and you need to talk through, and you need to talk that through with your provider. There's more urgency around this because of this cost of living crisis. So those things have always been less well suited to self-serve, but during the pandemic, even those things, we saw people more willing to self-serve. Now, for the first time in 2022, we've actually seen a decrease in willingness to self-serve for certain kinds of things. Yeah, we've seen the first decrease that we've seen since we started doing this research. So when it comes to delivery, that continues to go up. So last year, the proportion of people who were happy to self-serve a delivery was 46, and it's gone up this year to 51. So now, pretty much half of all of us, of all age groups, are willing to self-serve a delivery query. So that for me feels quite, it's quite mainstream, it's quite normalized.
Yes.
When it comes to a refund, Last year, 34% of people were willing to self-serve a refund query, and that's gone down to 30%. That's actually gone down to 30%. When it comes to complaint, last year, 34% were willing to self-serve a complaint, and that's gone down to 28%. So if you like, what's happening is you've got, if you take like the whole sort of universe of different types of customer contact queries, you've got the simple ones, the what I'll call the transactional ones, like delivery, like like an account balance.
Yeah.
And those continue to become much more normalized within the world of self-serve. And people will continue, I think in the future, people will continue to be more willing. More people will be willing to self-serve those transactional types of queries. Then on the other hand, you've got the more complex types of things like I need my refund, or there's a problem with my bill. And actually people have pulled back from self-serving and now more wanting to talk to people, talk to a live advisor than they were last year. And that's really interesting because I think there's a few things in that. I think it's reflective of the wider environment. As we just talked about, I think there is a much greater need for reassurance, and that's only going to go up. The reassurance of having a live human tell you, yep, you're all good, right?
Yeah.
It's done, it's fine.
Yeah.
I think that need, which we started to talk about and observe during the pandemic, is really, really, really critical now, right now, when when getting that money back is really, really important and is really urgent. I also think that what we may be seeing is actually consumers are just getting savvy. When we're all in lockdown, when we had all these new channels available to us, we tried them. We were willing, we were open, we tried them, and we're starting to realize what self-serve is good for and what it's not good for. So it's great for delivery updates, it's great for my account balance, but actually maybe I did try to go to a self-serve portal and I typed in my refund, and it took the provider ages to get back to me. I never got a decent resolution, so eventually I had to pick up the phone. That's the only way I could get a resolution. And I think perhaps mixed early experiences with self-serve channels has pushed people to go back to assisted channels, because let's face it, self-serve isn't good for everything. And I think what consumers are learning and what providers are learning is what channels are good for what. And it's really important to match the channel with the query. So for those simpler things, yeah, absolutely deflect all the demand and try to take your assisted demand down to zero. You shouldn't want anybody calling in on the phones to get a delivery update. If you get your self-serve delivery update experience right, you should be able to reduce that demand down to zero.
Yeah.
For other types of queries, though, there will always be a need for assisted, because automation can never replace what a human can bring. And that's when the content of that query, the nature of that query is urgent, it's emotive, when there's a lot at stake to the customer. And I think we're starting to learn that. Providers, the industry, organizations, but also people, consumers, we are starting to realize, okay, so if it's this kind of thing, I'll use the app, or I'll go online. If it's that kind of thing, I'll pick up the phone.
And you're starting to see, aren't you? I take a keen interest in anything that's in the media about our industry, and some of the language around some of that self-serve chatbots. It's very similar to when IVRs first started to appear. It's kind of the consumer champions will be saying how to get round the chatbot, how to navigate past the chatbot to speak to a human. And I think isn't that interesting? Rather than how do we, what is it? They're not looking at what the chatbot isn't doing for them. They're going, right, I've just got to get round it. Why? It's fascinating. It's what other things were there then that kind of surprised you? Because that is a surprise to see a decrease in self-serve. And I think, to your earlier point around this being currency, to look for leaders to look at this report and go, we need to be aware of this. This is, are we comfortable with our provision? Are we comfortable that to your point, the user experience means that someone can self-serve all the way through, no problem, shouldn't have to contact us, because here are some signs that people are maybe starting to go, well, doubt's creeping in again.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And the leaders that I talk to overwhelmingly do get it. And I think what we've we've got to a point, I think now, with the pandemic experience still very recent in our minds, and this experimentation, if you like, with different channels having yielded, I think, useful understanding and data for us. We've got to a point where I think we're starting to get a better understanding of the limits of deflection, of the limits, the boundaries of automation. Certainly, at least with what automation can deliver today. Now, in the future, automation will do a lot more and be able to deliver a lot more than it can today. But I think it is a fact that chatbots today can deliver a certain kind of experience, but chatbots, at least the level of sophistication of chatbots today, can in no way replicate what a human can do. Don't even try to use a chatbot to replicate what a human can do. Use a chatbot to deliver essentially an automated experience rather than a human experience, right? I think where chatbots have failed is where we've tried to implement a chatbot to try to mimic a human experience. Now that's consumers see right through that. That's rubbish, right? It's an authentic bad experience. If you accept that it's automation, it's just another form of automation, then chatbots have a place, but don't try to put a chatbot in place where you need a human. So I think what we're seeing is the pendulum has swung a little bit back the other way, where we're just getting all a little bit more knowledgeable about what automation does and what different channels can do, and how to align the strengths and weaknesses of different channels with the type of query. But underpinning all of this is, of course, the external environment that we're in, when actually more than ever people do want to talk to humans, because the urgency of their queries is just that much greater than ever before. And I think the most savvy and the most customer-centric organizations realize that they do need to continue to invest in their new channels and in automation and in self-serve, but they also need to retain capacity in their assisted lines as well, and offer the option to customers. So that, and as we talked about at the beginning, different people want different things. Some people want to go straight into the digital experience, and other people want to be able to pick up the phone. And sometimes you need a bit of both. There's sometimes when I am happy to self-serve, and there are times when I will need to talk to people. So I think what we've moved rightly away from is this idea of just deflection, pure deflection, and into this environment where actually we understand the right kind of deflection, appropriate deflection. And for some things, deflection is appropriate. For other things, deflection is not appropriate, especially right now in this environment that we're living in.
I really like what you're saying around what is using. So what are you deflecting and why? Is it helpful to the customer? Chatbot, don't try and replicate a human. Like I used a chatbot the other day for a CRM system that we use. Perfect. Because it was, this doesn't seem to be working, and it prompted me with, is it this or this? And I went, no, it's option 3. Okay, you just need to do this. I did it. Has that worked? Yes. Thank you. Goodbye. Perfect. And that kind of being specific and saying what is the purpose. It seems like it's your research is showing that loud and clear. We need to get a bit more targeted and think about, as you said, the user experience. Were there any other trends from some of the previous reports that kind of stood out, even if it's the same? Or
so this one isn't a trend because it was new in 2022, but I thought I'd give a shout out to it because it is quite interesting. I think it's quite relevant given the focus on recruitment and retention at the moment. It's the
hot topic.
It's how the general public see careers in customer service.
Ooh,
and
yes.
It's something that gets written about a lot. In fact, there's a program on Channel 4 which might have aired by the time that the podcast goes live. It's on I think Thursday the 30th of June. It's probably on Channel 4 Player or 4. if you want to catch up. But it's all about life. It's an hour's documentary on the contact center. So that'll be one for everybody to watch as an example of how.
Is that the one that's got the word chaos in the title as well? Yeah.
Yes, which
okay.
I thought was interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That in itself is interesting. It doesn't matter how balanced documentary is. They
No.
already are positioning it in a certain way. It's called Contact Center or Call Center Chaos.
Yeah.
Is the title of the documentary already, right?
Yeah.
If you don't work in industry, if you don't
I
work in
wonder...
industry, that's going to make you think in a certain way.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's called, I think the title, the exact words are Call Center Chaos, Britain on Hold. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? And you know, the reality is, if you read your favorite newspaper and you read anything about contact centers, there's a certain impression that you'll get from the world of customer service and contact centers, and it isn't overwhelmingly a positive one. And I think a lot of that is probably just the remnants of the past. You know, the remnants of
100%.
maybe what life in contact centers was like in the 1980s. It's an easy industry to bash, if you like.
And this is a better representation. This, for me, represents what our industry is about, the work you're doing with Odigo and CCMA. This is our industry, that we're customer first, nuanced, detailed. I think those kind of, I saw that advertised, that program, and my heart sank a little bit, as it does regularly with some of the articles and programs that you see, because it's so lazy. It's lazy broadcasting, lazy journalism. You know,
it's lazy. It's lazy. And the thing I always say to people, as a bit of an aside, Martin, but I think I always say to people is, if this is the way that things are portrayed about something you know a lot about, we know a lot about it because we're in the industry and we know better. Think about how your perceptions are being influenced when you're being bombarded by things that you don't know anything about.
Very true.
All the stuff that you consume in the media, all of it has a slant and all of it has an angle, but you just don't know it because you don't know anything better. So just it's an aside, but just be super critical whenever you consume anything in from the media. But yes, it's lazy. It's a trope. It's a trope that refuses to die. And there's no doubt, as always, there's probably some truth somewhere.
Yeah,
but
of course.
Survey, we wanted to explore a little bit in the research, and we wanted to understand in the minds of the general public what are sort of the good parts of working in customer service, and what are maybe some of the not so good parts of working in the customer service. So what we found was, and this is probably not hugely surprising, and this is one that I think probably is fair, if I'm being brutally honest. The areas that in the minds of the general public are the least positive, if you like, the areas that the industry needs to work hardest on improving in the minds of the general public are pay and benefits and career progression.
Wow. The first one is absolutely is spot on, I think.
It's fair there, isn't it? You can't argue with that. You can't argue with that. And it's easy for me to say, oh, people need to pay more. I'm not the CFO, and I don't have the, I don't have to make those difficult decisions. But there is, I think, I think there's a reality in terms of what your average frontline advisor makes versus the complexity of the role and what we ask them to do, particularly now, because all the simpler stuff is going to automation. We're asking our frontline advisors to not only know our products, know our organizations, know where to get help, and be incredibly resourceful. We're asking them to switch between all these different screens, because we know that's the reality of fragmented technology, is to be a tech expert and to be able to switch between screen A, B, C, D, and E to solve the problem, and be incredibly emotionally intelligent. Yeah, because that's what our customers need today. Are we paying them enough? I don't think so. But no, easy for me to say.
I'm 100% behind you, but like you, I very rarely have to get involved in those difficult kind of decisions. But for our industry's sake, it's something that we should be discussing, addressing, finding ways of dealing with it, because without those guys coming in and doing that work, we don't have an industry. And I don't see anyone doing anything massively different, which worries me, because you will often see someone. Do you remember the first companies that went, we're doing a 4-day week, and bit by bit, more and more people do it. I haven't seen the same like beachhead being made saying, you know what, we're going to pay people far more than they could get working in retail or in Starbucks or wherever, because we do know that we're asking a lot more of them, which is so true. Because I think we talk about it used to be the agent of 2020 is going to be doing XYZ, you know, back in 2015, that people liked the 2020 number. Now it's still the narrative's still pretty much the same, which is, oh, there'll be complex problem solvers and there'll be so much variety in their job. That is great, but that isn't something that we could go out and attract people to come and work. That can, you're going to be an expert problem solver. Okay, that sounds challenging. How much will you pay me? You know, we need to do something. We really do. I'm surprised at the second one, career progression.
I think the second one, I'll come back to your earlier comment in just a tick, but I think the second one is, I think there's some truth in it. I mean, the reality is, if you're on the front line, what is this typical ratio, sort of advisor to manager? It's about 10 to 12, isn't it? You've got one manager role for every 10 to 12 advisor roles. So, yeah, where are you going to go? There's not that many managers roles available. What the good news is that many organizations are getting better at creating opportunities elsewhere. You know, you don't just have to stay in the contact center.
That's the thing. And I think, because you're right, it's not just one direction. And I think one of the things we have to get better at is by saying, you know what, when you walk through this door, when you become an agent, you have this whole vista of roles. Are you interested in helping people, training, develop? You can go and see the L&D team. You like numbers, go and see finance, workforce management, HR, wherever it may be. Those are and I don't think we're good at saying, by walking in here, you're walking into a careers fair.
That's exactly it. It's about positioning it in that way. This is changing the perception, as long as, of course, you're actually delivering against this. But many organizations are starting to deliver against it, and recognizing that time spent in a contact center on the front lines is an incredibly good training ground. You learn so much about the organization.
Yes.
You become naturally resourceful. You're a natural problem solver. You know how to overcome barriers, because you literally do that every hour, every single day.
Yeah.
You're good with people. You're patient. It just teaches you so much that you can bring into so many other roles. So I do think that that's a perception gap for sure. But just coming back to what you said. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, and you understand consumers.
Yeah, you understand people.
Deal with consumers every day.
You know, the emotional intelligence bit is both at an interpersonal level, but you're naturally customer centric.
Yeah.
You know better than anybody else in the organization what the customer is saying, what the customer wants. To the point about paying benefits, I'm starting to hear some anecdotal evidence, and I think this is much about the general sort of recruitment challenge and the tight job market as anything else. But if it helps drive change, then that's all good. I'm starting to hear about conversations being had along those lines of, we need to do things differently. But
right,
honestly, I don't see it as a bottom up. You know, it's not going to happen in a contact center. It's going to happen. If it happens, it has to happen top down. We have. I sometimes I draw analogies with customer service and customer contact sector with the digital marketing sector. So digital marketing, online advertising, for example, is a $500 billion US business. I'm old enough to remember when it didn't exist. You know, so in a generation, it's gone from zero to $500 billion. And if you look at almost every developed country in the world, including the UK, now digital advertising far outstripped television and traditional media. And there's a reason for that. Is because digital advertising, providers of digital advertising are really good at telling companies, telling advertisers, this is what you get for your money. And without us, you wouldn't get this. And I think we can learn something from that in our industry. We take it for granted, we know intuitively that good customer service delivers business outcomes, but we kind of need to prove it. We need to get better at talking to people who are not naturally customer orientated. We need to get better at talking to people who have to make those difficult financial decisions, and they're difficult. Do you invest more in your contact center, or do you invest more in your product? These are difficult decisions to make, because ultimately money going somewhere is money not going somewhere else. So you've got to make really hard-nosed arguments supported by data around your ROI. There's a term called attribution, which attribution is a common term in the world of digital marketing. It's a science. If you spend £10 on this with us, you will get these many eyeballs, you'll get this much of awareness, and there is a whole science that has been built around this. And because attribution is so now well accepted in the world of digital marketing, that has powered that industry to the growth that they've achieved today. I think we can learn something from that in our world, and it's great to see things like data science now becoming a thing within the world of contact centers. I don't mean contact centers working with data science teams, I mean data science teams sitting in contact centers.
Yes,
I'm data people sitting in contact centers and starting to take seriously this idea of, let's prove the value that we bring. Let's prove the value of a customer contact. Let's shift the conversation away from cost to serve, which is kind of where it sits, right? Cost. Let's shift the conversation away from cost to value. Let's prove the value that we're delivering. If we can do that, then we start to make the case for more investment and better salaries. So for me, that's the heart of it, and it's a big thing. It's going to take time to do, but if we all start to get onto that bandwagon, if we all start to think more about not cost but value, and convincing the people in our organizations about value, improving it through science, that's the route to paying people what they deserve. I just want to quickly also mention the one thing, if you like, that is seen really positively. So the things about working customer service, paying benefits not as good as some other things, career progression not as good. The thing that was really interesting actually about this survey and what the survey told us is that actually there's really strong positive sentiment around customer service, and the business of customer service does an important job for the community.
Oh, that's lovely.
It does an important job for the community, which is another argument to pay more. And I think it is lovely. It's validation of the role that customer service plays and contact centers play. It's a validation of it's not an optional function. I think it's the first time we've done this year, so I don't have comparative data, but my guess is it has that perception that what we do in contact centers is important to the communities in which you operate. My hunch is that's gone up, and my hunch is when we do this again next year with CCMA and supported by Odigo, it's going to go up again, because customer service has never been more important.
100% agree.
And of course we're biased because we work in the industry, but think about all those situations as we talked a bit about just in the last hour. The need for reassurance, the need to know that your transaction has been successfully completed. It's really critical, I think, for us to know and be comforted that the general public knows how important is the job that we are doing for the public. During the pandemic, it became really apparent. We were the front lines. We're holding the fort, if you like. When other departments were closing down, our lines were still open. And I think that has only continues in the current environment that we are today, when people need help. More people need more help than ever before. In today's environment, and that's the job that we do. We help people.
I love that, and both to you, Stephen, your team, the CCMA and Odigo, thanks very much for doing this research, because as you say, I think it's things like this that not only are they currency, they help people make more informed decisions, but they show our industry in the light it should be shown: a professional, that we're data driven, that we're progressive, and like you say, at a time when people, consumers, need help, tough times. We've stood up for the last 2 years. We'll carry on standing up, and I think it's great. Now, where can, you've said it before, but where can people get hold of this research?
Go to ccma.org.uk. There's a research tab if you go up to the top of the screen, and it's a free download from there.
Brilliant.
It's a full report, lots and lots of data, as well as commentary from our the industry leaders that we talk to help interpret the data, as well as comparisons versus, you know, some of which I've briefly mentioned during this discussion, comparisons over, you know, versus previous waves. So it's all in there. And if you do go there, I hope you find it useful, and get in touch with, feel free to get in touch with me if you've got any questions. If you do download it, read it, and would like to ask anything, I'm my email, my DMs are open.
That's great, and I feel like we've only scratched the surface, but it's been fascinating. So Stephen, thank you so much for coming on.
The pleasure's all mine, Martin. Thanks again for having me.
And we'll see you soon. We'll be chatting some more soon.
Definitely. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.